Date and time of contact, Monday, 1st September 2014, 10:02 p.m. Translators, DeepL Translator, Joseph Darmanin, FIGU Landesgruppe Australia. Date of original translation, Tuesday, 15th December 2020. Corrections and improvements made, Joseph Darmanin. Contact persons, Synopsis. This is the entire contact report. Authorized but unofficial DeepL preliminary English translations and most probably contains errors. Contact Report 594 Translation 594th Contact Monday, 1st September 2014, 10:02 p.m.
I am 2 minutes late, unfortunately, because I was still sorting something out with Silvano and Madeleine in the kitchen and did not pay attention to the fact that it was already 10:00 p.m. But welcome, Ptaah, and greetings to dear friend.
I also extend my greetings to you, Eduard, my friend. Then, as we agreed, let us turn to some entertainment today rather than to work straight away.
There is a bit of a lack of that, because for the last 11 nights you have been here, we have not been able to talk about anything other than Gaida's book, because editing it takes up so much time. Honestly, I am glad we can have some conversation today before we get back to work.
Then my question, have you expressed to Bernadette my wish regarding the summary and editing of all her articles written so far that relate to spiritual teaching matters in order to make a book work out of it?
I have done that, and I have also mentioned that apart from such articles, other good remarks that only marginally deal with the spiritual teaching can also be processed in this book.
However, I would like to make it clear that I will be able to look through everything when the whole thing is compiled. In doing so, I would also like articles she has written in relation to your personality to be included in the work as well, but everything should be listed chronologically.
Because of the chronology, this has already been discussed with Bernadette, but there was no mention of articles relating to me in your proposal.
I actually did not talk about that, because that idea developed after the fact, after I had already left.
Oh, I see. Then I would like to hear your opinion on what the main causes of flooding are. Of course I know about that, like soil compaction, droughts and overwatered areas due to continuous rains, and so on. Your daughter Simiase spoke about this in the 1970s, and you also spoke about it in 2006, saying that Europe was becoming swampy due to heavy rainfall. Can you perhaps say something more specifically about that, please?
Floods, as they have been occurring all over the world for some time now and will continue to do so in the future, are not simply caused by normal rainfall, but by enormous amounts of rain caused by climate change, for which Earth human beings are undoubtedly to blame. The origin and the effects of this can only be found in the grievances and degenerating machinations that have been and continue to be caused by massive overpopulation. The degenerations caused by Earth human beings with regard to the fauna and flora as well as the climate in the planet itself have brought the entire balance of nature into turmoil and to the brink of collapse, as a result of which nature has been reacting for some time according to the given law of causality. This means that the degenerate causes created by Earth human beings with regard to nature and the planet, as well as the fauna and flora, are now, and have been for some time, producing the corresponding effects. A fact which, however, is still denied by the stupid and irresponsible. It does not want to be recognized that it is the Earth human beings themselves who are to blame for the climate disaster, because large parts of nature, the climate and the fauna and flora have been destroyed, which has been done by nuclear and toxic contamination as well as by clearing rainforests, gigantic dams, building cities, destroying landscapes, correcting watercourses, exploiting earth resources, and polluting the environment, and so on. But all this is also based on various irrational and irrational factors such as the irresponsible compaction of the soil with heavy vehicles, as these are used and employed in agriculture and in the soil cultivation industry, and so on, with excessive irrationality. Also the concreting over and asphalting of roads, paths and other areas promotes all kinds of mischief. Furthermore, floods are also caused by periods of drought, whereby streams, alluvial zones and other wetlands as well as lakes and rivers, but also gardens, fields, meadows, fields, Forest soils and fallow land dry out and harden to such an extent that they can no longer absorb or soak up water when there is abundant rainfall. This means that the rain can no longer drain away into the depleted and hardened soil, but is dammed up and leads to flooding. On the other hand, however, large floods are also caused by huge amounts of unusually heavy storm rainfall and by melting snow and glaciers, whereby these masses of water then overflow the streams, lakes and rivers, penetrate into the land and flood it. It is not uncommon for the land to already be so saturated by heavy rains and melting snow that the water masses can no longer drain away, accumulate, and also cause flooding. Since overpopulation on Earth has become more and more dangerous to nature, in that floodplain areas have been built over with houses and roads, and so on, and are still being built over, the enormous masses of water caused by abnormal rainfall as storms, as well as by melting snow and glaciers, can no longer flow out into their natural escape routes, such as floodplain areas built over with houses, roads, buildings, and so on, when floods occur. Consequently, these floodplains, which have been built up through human irrationality and irresponsibility and converted into residential areas, are flooded, causing ever more severe damage to human achievements and also costing more and more human lives. This is in addition to all the fauna and flora that has been killed and destroyed and continues to be killed and destroyed by the irrational construction of structures by human beings. And this is a result of the increasing overpopulation and its lack of space, through which the water escape areas, as well as dangerous mountain slopes, volcanic areas and sea beaches, as well as stream, river and lake banks, are being built up to dangerously close to the water bodies with housing, and so on. If high tides or tsunamis and so on form, then the shores and beaches are flooded, and houses, buildings and other human achievements are swept into the waters and destroyed. Therefore, proper safety distances from human structures and so on to water bodies should be maintained. For example, in case of flowing or stagnant water bodies such as streams, rivers, and lakes, a minimum distance of 70 meters to the water bodies should be considered and maintained, depending on the size and dangerousness of the respective water bodies. Furthermore, a minimum height of 3 meters above the highest water level ever measured or to be expected is to be calculated. It is irresponsible to construct dwellings and other buildings and so on without taking this safety measure into account. In the case of a sea, the minimum safety height for buildings should also be 3 meters above sea level, while the minimum distance to the beach should be calculated as 200 meters. However, these measures only apply in relation to seas that are not at high risk from seaquakes. Otherwise, the minimum height above sea level and the distance to the sea must be calculated otherwise according to the danger posed by seaquakes and thus tsunamis.
If I remember correctly, your daughter Simyase said something along these lines back in the 1970s, and you have also spoken about this before. It may well have been about 15 years ago. But something else. Nowadays, food producers, especially farmers and vegetable and fruit and berry producers and so on, are making a killing with so-called bioproducts. Effectively, horrendous profits are being raked in with organic products, although there is basically nothing special behind these products, because they are simply grown and harvested in a natural way without chemicals and poisons. This is the way it has been done since time immemorial, and is completely natural, so there is nothing special behind it. The so-called organic producers do nothing else but let their fruits, berries and vegetables and so on grow and flourish in a completely natural way without using chemical toxins. This means that they have far fewer financial expenses and no more work than those who contaminate their food with toxic chemicals. But since the earthlings are now being made to believe that organic products have to be specially produced and are more nutritious, the misled believe this and buy the stuff at translated expensive prices. In terms of nutritional value, organic products are no better or worse than foods treated with chemical toxins. In terms of quality, it is probably a bit different, because purely naturally grown is certainly better. What is the only difference is that real organic products contain much less chemical toxins than the non-bio products. It is true that organic products also contain certain toxins that affect organic products from the air and through water, be it rain or groundwater, but these are fewer than in the case of chemically treated products, so the chemical influences are hardly worth mentioning. But if I consider that you said that even the smallest toxins in the body of human beings are already dangerous to health, then this is also questionable with regard to organic products or purely natural foods of all kinds. So the consumers who swear by organic are actually being deceived when these things are considered, namely that behind it all there is nothing other than the natural process of natural growth and flourishing that has existed since time immemorial, whereby the production is not connected with much more work but with less costs than when chemical toxins are applied to the plants, fruits, berries, herbs and vegetables, and these are also treated with chemical growth substances. However, the organic product manufacturers do not care about this, but they use the ignorance of the consumers to make horrendous profits from their products. What do you think about this?
What you say is also my opinion. Bio is a misleading term, because the foodstuffs listed under this designation with regard to vegetables, fruits, herbs, fruits and berries and so on are quite simply naturally planted, grown and harvested as well as prepared foodstuffs, as they thrive in a natural way without chemical agents and other artificial toxins, and so on. Bio or biological simply means that living nature or natural life processes and living conditions are present in relation to the production of food. It also means that products are made from natural materials, as well as that bioproducts are natural, pure, ecological, residue-free, environmentally friendly, environmentally compatible and untreated and unsprayed by chemical substances, as well as that no artificial nutrients are added to them. In other words, they are completely naturally produced natural foods of all kinds, which are not treated with artificial fertilizers and growth stimulants, nor with chemical toxins against pests, and so on. Natural foods of all kinds are nourished exclusively natural organic with natural fertilizers and protected with natural pesticides.
This is clear to me, although I assume that many bio consumers imagine something else by this and think that bio products have to be specially cultivated and treated, because they do not know that it is purely just the absolutely natural growth process of nature. This means that organic food does not have to be specially treated because it is left in its natural state. But when you talk about natural fertilizer, what is recommended in this respect? Do you know anything about this?
My knowledge is sufficient to be able to say something about it, because in my spare time I am equally occupied with agriculture and horticulture, as is also Quetzal.
Aha, I did not know that. Let's hear what you have to say regarding natural fertilization, though.
Natural fertilizers are extremely useful as nutrients in concentrated form for a healthy, nutritious soil so that plants, vegetables, berries, herbs and fruits can thrive and grow well if they have a nutrient-rich soil that is adapted to their needs. So all plants of all kinds, as well as trees, bushes and shrubs, need a good, nutritious soil, but only purely natural fertilizer and never artificial fertilizer should be used to put the necessary nutrients into the soil. Any kind of artificial fertilizer leaches the soil on the one hand, and on the other hand it kills or drives away useful soil organisms. Natural fertilizers absolutely do their job well, such as natural compost, horn shavings and green manure. So everything that is possible should be composted, such as plant waste, which should be stored or piled up to let it slowly decompose in a completely natural way. If the compost has been standing long enough, it can be refined, for example by throwing it through a compost grid or a coarse meshed compost sieve. When fertilizing, however, do not use too much compost, because it contains a lot of nutrients. Besides, animal dung can also be used as a valuable natural fertilizer, such as
cow dung, horse droppings and other animal dung, right?
Correct. This animal dung fertilizer is extremely effective, but it must not be used fresh, because it is very sharp and concentrated. Consequently, it must be left to settle a little, and also only a little may be taken for fertilizing. If the soil is over-fertilized by any kind of fertilizer, it can be restored to normal by planting the malva neglected abundantly in the over-fertilized soil.
As far as I know, there is also a good odorless and harmless biological and therefore natural fertilizer, which consists of malt germs as well as waste from beer production and sugar beet, although this should also be used with moderation in purpose. Besides, this fertilizer only takes effect after a few months, and if I remember correctly, it also contains nitrogen and potassium, so nutrients that are of enormous importance in the root formation of plants.
That is correct, of course. Which reminds me that you also have some experience in the field of horticulture and forestry, so you also know about natural fertilizers. But if I am to say something more about biological fertilizers, I would like to mention rock and lime meals, which have a positive effect on the soil because they contain many minerals that are important not only for the soil but also for the plants. Then there are also biological fertilizers.
If I may interrupt you again, the different flowers also improve the soil, and what's more, their different compositions mean that they can be individually adapted to the soil in question.
Thanks. That is of course correct and should have been mentioned by me. But this way I will now say that I also wanted to mention other biological fertilizers that are very effective, such as the excrements of cormorants or penguins, which are especially enriched with phosphoric acid and nitrogen.
Guano is what we call this fertilizer produced by seabirds. However, excrement from other birds and from feathered fowl can also be used as good fertilizer.
I am aware of that, but if we are talking about seabirds and feathered game, then we also have to mention natural fertilizers that come from animals, such as horn meal in particular, which is made from ground cattle horns, but also horn shavings, which are made by chopping up cattle claws. And before you describe their effect, I will say that these natural fertilizers neutralize stuff in the soil.
Many human beings who are amateur gardeners often do not know what soil is, so it would be necessary for them to know something in relation to soil chemistry before planting a garden. The simplest knowledge in relation to a garden should be to take a reading in the soil to determine what the acidity or alkalinity of the soil is. The fact is that different plants require different levels if they are to thrive and grow correctly. If the of the soil is known, plants that thrive according to the soil can be used accordingly. On the other hand, biological means can also be used to change the of the soil in order to broaden or simply change the range of plants that want to be used. Taking a measurement yourself is not problematic, as there are various ways of doing this, where beef testers from the pharmacy, for example, can be useful. In principle, the of the soil does not have to be the same throughout the garden, because it can be freely changed to grow different plants. I know that the soil can be made less acidic if the soil is below 7, in which case simply add lime or wood ash to the soil. If the soil needs to be less alkaline, for example if it has a above 7, then this can be changed by incorporating organic material into the soil, such as spruce needles, peat or composted leaves. And what I want to say further regarding biological fertilizer, coffee and tea residues, when mixed with other natural fertilizers, are also good energy suppliers for the plants, whereby they can be scattered directly or worked into the soil. What are also very valuable biological fertilizers that can be made yourself are yolks made from plants, such as when stinging nettles are soaked in water and fermentation produces stinging nettle yolks. Compost liquid manure is also very good, which is made by mixing rainwater with compost in a container and then letting the whole thing steep until a brown compost liquid manure is produced, which is called compost tea.
The following can be found on the internet, subsequently attached to the contact report about compost tea. Microorganisms activate soil life applications of compost tea. Compost tea is a simple, inexpensive soil and plant treatment method that can be implemented by oneself without large investments. Open source ecology. After the brewing process, the finished compost tea mixture is diluted according to the application 1 and is to be applied within a period of about 4 hours. 2. Optimal is the application shortly after a rain or irrigation. In the evening hours, the soil should in any case not be too dry. Soil with low soil life should be treated 5 to 7 times at 1 month intervals in the first years from April/May to September/October, after which treatments can be reduced to 2 times a year depending on the biological activity of the soil. The simplest method of compost tea application for soil activation is drenching, dilution ratio 1:5. It is particularly suitable for smaller croplands targeted applications in private gardens. Drip hoses are also more suitable for home gardens because they strongly interfere with mechanical soil cultivation on larger cultivated areas. Spraying, dilution ratio 1:10, as foliar application gets its special meaning in biological plant protection. The time of application depends on the need. The evening hours after rain are also optimal here. As a rule, leafy vegetables should not be sprayed at all for reasons of hygiene. Here, soil treatment to strengthen the plants is the method of choice. Adding compost tea to the sprinkler system or applying it by means of a cultivation sprayer has the advantage that the consumption can be better dosed and also makes compost tea interesting for larger stands. Compost tea can also be used when building up a compost heap, dilution ratio 1:1.
I guess it is not necessary for me to elaborate further then.
Sorry, I guess I was a bit forward with my explanations.
There is no need for an apology, because your explanations are in accordance with correctness.
Actually, the only thing missing is something in relation to natural pesticides, which should actually still be said. But this would probably go too far, so it is probably smarter to mention a book that deals with this extensively. The title is Natural Pest Control Agents, published by Elmer Verlag by the authors Heinrich Smutter and Jörg Huber. The ISB number is 978-38001-4754-0 and the price in euro 39.90. The book was published in 2005, has 264 pages, 36 tables, 50/photos and /illustrations and is hardbound.
I am interested in that. Do you have it in your possession, and if so, may I read it each time I am here?
That is unquestionable. You can also take it with you and study it if you clean it first, as is customary and necessary.
I am happy to do that.
Now we have talked about vegetables, berries, fruits and herbs in terms of fertilizing worries in this regard. For my next question I would also like to include the trees, bushes and shrubs. As I know, all these plants also feel distress when they are somehow distressed, such as when they do not get enough moisture and nutrients, either by nature itself or by the unreasonableness of human beings. Even your father Svarhoth taught me that when the plants suffer distress in any way, they then send out help signals. Can you tell me how this goes on?
What my father explained to you is that the plants of all genera and species, when they fall into some state of distress, produce and emit fine ultrasonic waves which are to be understood as distress signals.
So plants of all genera and species, as you say, produce ultrasonic distress signals when they are in distress. But Svarhoth also told me that higher plants, as well as shrubs, bushes and trees, emit something like fear signals and pain signals, which probably also happens in the ultrasonic range, right? Also, higher plants are empathic in a very subtle form, as are animals, creatures, birds, fish, amphibians and reptiles, because these life forms are also thinking or instinctive in some form, whereas impulse factors play a role in plants.
What you have been taught by my father is of course correct.
Which, unfortunately, has not yet been researched by our competent scientists and has therefore also not penetrated. With regard to the fine empathic abilities of animals, fish, birds, amphibians and reptiles, and so on, they are still diligently groping around in the dark, because this field of knowledge has remained unexplored up to now, probably simply because there is no interest in it. And since the truth that plants and animals, birds, amphibians, fish and reptiles of all genera and species and so on are empathically inclined is largely unknown, care is also not taken to ensure that they receive the necessary attention in care as well as treatment appropriate to their species. Moreover, it is to be said that it is precisely in the case of non-human living beings that we speak only of animals without referring to them according to their genus, as you Plejadians do, and call all life forms by genus.
The non-human life forms cannot simply be called animals, for animals are only suckling life forms. There are also birds, fowl, fish, reptiles, amphibians, insects, and all manner of creatures which are to be designated according to their species. It is absolutely incorrect to call all non-human living beings simply animals, for in principle they must be specified by name according to their genus and species. This also applies to the genus and species of animals. Consequently, a cow must be called a mammal, an elephant and a bull must also be called mammals. If the living beings in question are from the bird world, then they are also specified as birds, as are amphibians, reptiles and insects and so on according to their genus and species. Of course, the genus human beings must also be referred to as human beings, consequently they are also referred to as such. From our point of view, it is incomprehensible that Earth human beings speak of all non-human life forms only as animals and do not specify the genus and species. And what you said about the lack of interest in the empathic abilities of plants and non-human life forms is also correct. And this also says that the majority of Earth human beings are still trapped in a stage of consciousness development with regard to the recognition of reality and truth, which leaves Earth human beings still very far behind with regard to humanity, morality, and a sense of responsibility towards themselves, their fellow human beings, nature, its fauna and flora, as well as the knowledge and cultivation of the teaching of truth, the teaching of the Spirit, teaching of life. And this does not only apply to the majority of Earth human beings in general, but also to very many scientists.
That is indeed the case. The majority of Earth human beings do not care about the creative natural laws and commandments, and least of all about obeying them. Unfortunately, nothing can be expected from the great mass of human beings that will bring humanity forward, for the fact is that only a human being who thinks further than the bulk of all human beings can change the world and lead it to the better, the good and the positive.
Your words are in line with reality and truth.
But it is also to be said that this requires true inner and outer greatness as well as self-peace, self-harmony and self-freedom as well as self-love. And it is also to be said that only a human being who thinks and acts well and positively and better than the majority of human beings can change the world and bring progress, success, good, positive and valuable things. But for this to be done, the human being must consciously choose life. It is that life itself always chooses life, while the cowardly human being seeks death and runs away from life and its responsibilities.
Obviously, we no longer get to turn to Gaida's book today. Yes, that is probably so, because I have still another thing which I want to mention, how, for example, that certain human beings erroneously believe and claim that they could not fall for any religions in their sects, as well as not for philosophical or political sects. My opinion and experience on that to the contrary is that each human being is susceptible to it, namely, regardless of which descent he or she is, which education and which occupation and which opinion he or she has, if he or she recognizes not the creational natural laws and recommendations and follows them steadfastly and unservingly in life. What do you think about that? What you say is right without discussion. However, on that it must also be said that a profound self-discipline as well as the necessary knowledge and the absolute certainty in regard to the rightness of the laws and recommendations belongs to that. Also the motivation and the will are just as important as the unflappable endurance and the power, and so on, to be able to resist, to rationality and intellect, all hostilities, to all the none and compulsions, which arise in many kinds of forms and want to impair the whole of the resistance against the sectarianism of every kind and the right action and behavior.
Actually, I was also going to sort of come to that, but I think your words are exactly correct and have expressed the necessities. I probably would not have been able to do it myself in such a short and concise way, because I probably would have needed more words. But I have something else. Still, even scientists argue about how the universe could have come into being. Among these people, of course, are many God-believers who assume a divine power and intelligence as the origin of the universe and everything that exists in it, and also openly advocate this crazy theory. And this happens in spite of the fact that in modern times the physical sciences can prove and demonstrate a great deal that everything that exists is based on physical laws of nature. And in fact it is the case that the universe, as well as everything existent in it, as well as everything of nature, fauna and flora, and also human beings, came into being through physical laws of nature and natural biophysical factors.
No comment is required on this, for you have stated that which corresponds to reality and its truth.
What I am interested in for once are some facts regarding volcanoes. I have never read anything useful or worth knowing from our scientists or volcanologists. Since, as you once mentioned, as a geologist you also deal with the subdiscipline of volcanology, or with the science that deals with the systematic study of volcanoes or the phenomena of volcanism, which also includes the prediction of volcanic eruptions, I want to ask you about the effects of the sulfuric acid of volcanoes on the Earth's climate.
Your question requires a little further elaboration, because with regard to the emission of sulfuric acid into the atmosphere, it is not only the volcanic eruptions that need to be mentioned, but also the human activities that produce sulfur dioxide, which influence the climate. The liquid sulfur dioxide is used by Earth human beings to dissolve numerous substances. Consequently, it is used as a valuable aprotic polar solvent. The sulfur dioxide is also used in the food industry as an antioxidant and preservative, especially in fruit juices, potato dishes, jam, dried fruit, and wine, which is however not exactly beneficial for the human organism as a whole. Sulfur dioxide is also used as a disinfectant and disinfecting agent. The sulfuric acid factor, which is connected with Earth human beings, is not the only one, however, for another is that there are also quite natural causes which have a damaging effect, such as causing climate change, as is also the case with severe volcanic eruptions, variations in solar activity and inherent fluctuations in the climate system must also be mentioned. The radiative forcing from explosive volcanic eruptions always fluctuates, so consequently the sulfuric acid content in the atmosphere also fluctuates. Large volcanic eruptions always cause climate and weather anomalies, especially when there is particularly strong volcanic activity, because this then results in an increase in the sulfuric acid aerosol in the lower stratosphere. This sulfuric acid aerosol is formed by the oxidation of magmatic sulfurous gases after their transport into the stratosphere. During strong volcanic eruptions, sulfur dioxide is thrown up to about 30 kilometers, whereby the tiny sulfuric acid droplets or aerosol droplets interfere with the incidence of sunlight, namely by reflecting the solar radiation back into space. The whole thing is to be judged according to the strength of the volcanic eruptions, because weak eruptions slow down climate change or global warming, while on the other hand strong volcanic eruptions hurl such large quantities of sulfuric acid into the atmosphere that the ozone layer is attacked and impaired. In the human body, sulfur dioxide destroys vitamin B1, as well as vitamin B12, which is also called cobalamin. Vitamin B1 is needed in the human organism for the transmission of nerve impulses and for the metabolism of carbohydrates, starch and sugar. For this reason, patients with diabetes mellitus in particular must make sure they have a sufficient supply of vitamin B1. If a vitamin B1 deficiency develops, various symptoms can become apparent, such as anxiety, lack of concentration, memory problems, fatigue and depressive moods. The following specific symptoms can also occur: feeling of anxiety, burning feet, heart problems, fast heartbeat, shortness of breath, muscle cramps, muscle paralysis, muscle pain and nerve disorders. Especially food that contains a lot of carbohydrates also needs more vitamin B1. As vitamin B1 is mainly contained in the outer layers of cereals, wholemeal products should be used in the diet. The white flour products should be avoided, as these can quickly lead to a vitamin B1 deficit. Vitamin B12 fulfills many important functions in the human organism, such as in the formation of red blood cells and in energy metabolism, and in relation to the nervous system. It also supports cell division, just as it helps to convert homocysteine, which is potentially dangerous for the cardiovascular system, into methionine. Furthermore, vitamin B12 is also very important with regard to cardiovascular diseases because it has a reducing effect on them. Finally, vitamin B12 is also very strengthening for the immune and nervous system. Furthermore, Earth human beings use sulfur dioxide as an important reactant for the production of sulfur trioxide, which is then used to produce concentrated sulfuric acid. Earth human beings also use sulfur dioxide for the production of many chemicals, dyes and even medicines, as well as for bleaching paper and textiles, and so on. In high concentrations, sulfur dioxide not only harms human beings, but also plants and mammals, birds of the feeder, reptiles, amphibians, fish, and all animals, as the oxidation products also lead to acid rain. This in turn affects sensitive ecosystems such as fields, floodplains, meadows, forests, streams, rivers, lakes, and even oceans, also attacking, damaging, and destroying buildings and materials. If I now come back to the aerosol droplets, then it is to be said again that these are tiny and thus reach heights of up to about 30 kilometers. The sulfuric acid droplets have very small radii of 0.1 to 0.5 millimeters and determine the volcanic aerosol in the lower stratosphere. Volcanic disturbances usually subside only slowly, consequently the emission of sulfur particles can persist for a long time. Moreover, when they are ejected, they persist for a long time, with a significant climatic impact and appearing for about 2 years after a suitably strong eruption. These tiny droplets can interact particularly intensively with radiation, partly backscattering visible light and absorbing radiation in the near-infrared as well as in the long-wave region of the spectrum. This results in less solar radiation reaching the Earth's surface, which cools the atmosphere. Furthermore, the absorption of radiation by the volcanic aerosol leads to considerable warming in the stratosphere, which quickly amounts to 25 degrees Celsius. These are the factors responsible for quite unexpected climatic consequences of tropical volcanic eruptions. Aerosol droplets of hydrogenated sulfuric acid are also chemically active, enabling the activation of chlorine compounds that ultimately destroy the ozone layer. Strong volcanic eruptions can be a significant, though often relatively short-lived, disruption to the climate system. In the case of large eruptions, however, the climate worldwide can be very severely affected. What is clear, however, whether small or large eruptions take place, is that they can contribute significantly to the sulfur balance of the atmosphere and are highly variable in space and time. Sulfur aerosols introduced by Earth human beings into the lower atmosphere, troposphere, can also influence the climate through their participation in radiative transfer. Volcanic aerosol in the stratosphere normally has effective radii in the range of the wavelength of visible sunlight. For this reason, they are particularly effective scatterers of sunlight. When large eruptions occur, direct solar radiation is reduced. Diffuse radiation also increases by almost the same amount, which makes the sky appear milky white during the day.
Sorry, that should be enough, as your answer is not meant to be a scientific treatise, but just to explain the broad strokes, which I guess is done.
If you say so.
I think so, because just what you have explained so far should be enough for general education.
Time is advanced, so I would like to discuss a few more important things with you, which should be for you only. Of course, then I will begin by asking the following in relation to the doctrine of the Spirit.
These things we have already discussed several times, but it is probably necessary that we actually talk about them further. Consequently, I want to elaborate on the following.
This is actually what I wanted to hear, because it gives me confirmation of the correctness of my assumption. And with that, it is now also time for me to retire because I still have a special job to do. Goodbye, dear friend Eduard. It will be some days before I come here again, for there are matters pending which require my presence.
Then goodbye too, Ptaah, my friend.